So, Billy, we have this conversation. It's an ongoing one in town, I think, about what is a successful season for the Bulls based on where the expectations were at the beginning of the season and how you guys really changed the expectations throughout the year by being at the top of the Eastern Conference. So, from your perspective, how do you define what is a successful season for the Bulls?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really proud of our guys, for a number of reasons. One is I think when the season started, there was just a lot of question marks, around our team. How would DeMar fit in? The team being, obviously relatively new. How would all this gel and mesh? The team was basically turned over this past summer. Was there enough time, for the group to get acclimated? How long would that take? And I give our guys a lot of credit from the standpoint that they all cut their summer short. They came into Chicago right after Labor Day, and they, I think, built really good relationships on the court and really, really good relationships off the court. And I think that expedited some of the process. I think when you look at Milwaukee, you look at Boston, you look at a lot of the teams in the East, they had been together for a while. So I think the feeling by all of us was, how do we kind of maybe speed up that process, come in a month early, let these guys play and pick up basketball before training camp started. And then obviously, we got off to, I think, a really good start. And then we were probably one of the first teams to get, hit with COVID. And, you sit there and say, okay, maybe we'll get through this sooner than later and we'll get our whole group back. And then after the COVID, we really got hit with an enormous amount of injuries. And, DeMar, I think before the All-Star break was on an incredible tear, playing really, really well. You're disappointed with Patrick Williams going out, for 5 months. Zach was dealing with a ligament tear in his thumb to start with, and then obviously dealing with his knee issues. And then really our 2 point guards, and Alex Caruso, and Lonzo Ball, Lonzo being out, really since the beginning of January, and then Caruso being in and out. So we had different guys step up at different times. But, after we got out of the All-Star break and we weren't completely whole, we clearly had the toughest schedule remaining in the NBA. We played against a lot of really good teams. And I do think playing against those teams, you find out more about yourself and what you have to do. So it was just a year where there was a lot of different things that we had to deal with, but I was really proud of the way the guys handled all of it. Now, the success part of it is the result of winning and losing. Yeah, I think we're all disappointed, that after the All-Star break with what happened. But, I give a guy like Io a lot of credit. If you would have told me before the year started, hey, listen, you're going to lose Patrick Williams for 5 months. Zach LaVine is going to have a ligament issue in his hand and a knee issue he's going to have to deal with. Lonzo Ball's not going to play after the beginning of January, and Alex Caruso is probably going to play in the regular season 35, 40 games, and he's not going to be healthy. You'd probably – and then you'd say Io is going to be your starting point guard. I think everybody would be scratching their head saying, geez, I don't even know what kind of year we would have.
Right.
So there was just so much on our plate, but our guys handled it really, really professionally. And it's given a lot of younger guys an experience to play. And I didn't even mention, Kobe White, just dealing with the shoulder surgery and missing all the training camp, and then him coming back in, and then him getting COVID. And listen, we're not the only team dealing with this stuff. There's a lot of teams that have dealt with it. But the one thing I really feel bad about for our players, even for the organization, is you look at what our group looked like when training camp started, and we had a very, very, very small sample size of what our team, was projected to be or what we could be. And we had a lot of different guys get into some roles that they maybe never anticipated being in, who I think have handled themselves pretty well. So, you want to get to this time of the season. You want to have these opportunities. Certainly to play against Milwaukee, we'll have to play a lot better than what we did against some of the better teams closing out the regular season.
And obviously, this is the defending champions. These guys are a really good team, as is evidenced by a title last year. And we know how good Giannis is. We know how good they are. Not many people giving you much of a chance. How do you keep that noise out of the locker room? How do you maintain your confidence in the face of that?
Well, I mean, the two times we played them, one time we played them in Milwaukee, and we really didn't have any players. We were really, I think it may have been on a back-to-back, and we were really dismantled. We had a lot of guys out, and we really competed and played pretty well, and it was I think maybe a 3 or 4 point game. And then we really, I think going into the fourth quarter here at home, we were up by 7. I thought we really got hurt on the offensive glass by them on some second shots, and, they kind of, again, pulled it out and won the game. And then we had 2 games where we were really dominated in. So I think in these situations for the players, regardless of what people are saying of chance or no chance or defending champions and, maybe the way we've played and some of the results we've had coming out of the All-Star break, I think you've got to really, for players, they've got to focus on what they can control. Like, what are the things that we have not done well that we clearly can control? And, I think when you look at, some of the games where we were really right there and had some opportunities, one was we did a really good job defending without fouling. And I think there's been a huge discrepancy at the free throw line between us and them. That's really, really hurt us. I think the other thing, too, is we're going to have to, as best we can with our size, try to neutralize them on the backboard because of their length and size. But we've got to be able to get back in transition. There's a lot of things I think we can do and we can do better, but it's got to all be based on the things you can control. And I think that in these situations, when you're in the playoffs, you hear this old cliche, every possession matters. You've got to have really 5 guys on the court connected and really concentrating at a high level. And there's got to be great communication. So for us, I think it all comes down to not what anybody else is saying, but what are the things that we can actually control and do a better job on.
And Bill, you speak from experience. You coached 41 games in the playoffs with Oklahoma City in the conference finals. So how different is it coaching in the postseason, whether it's shortening your rotation or maybe making a decision you wouldn't make on a Wednesday in February? How much different is it in the postseason?
I mean, I think it's almost like a different season, to be quite honest with you. One is you're seeing, a team, over and over and over. Right? So that's all you're locked in and focused on. And it's the same thing for Milwaukee. All they're locked in and focused on is us. During the regular season, you have these situations where, you play Orlando, then you go play Golden State, then you play Detroit, then you play Toronto, and you're playing against different styles of play, different personnel. Teams are playing to, different identities on offense and defense, and you're really relying on your principles and your habits going game to game because they're coming so quickly. So the level of detail, this time of year is totally different. And then I think the familiarity part, is really what stands out because you're going to have adjustment periods. Once, game one's over with, there'll be adjustments by both teams. But you start to understand personnel. There's really not necessarily a lot of tricks. You may be able to steal a basket here or there on an after timeout situation or a dead ball situation. But, we know what's coming. They're going to know what's coming. It really comes down to execution and those kind of things. I do think from an officiating standpoint, there's generally, I think, a lot more physicality, in the playoffs. I think being able to control your emotions because the intensity is so high and you've got to be able to really, when things are not going well, you got to be able to move to the next thing. Now, the thing that's interesting in the playoffs, and it's pretty similar in the regular season, the swings in a playoff game, there's generally about a 26-point swing, which means you're either down by 13 or up by 13, or it could be, maybe you're down by 18. There's going to be these swings in games, and you've got to emotionally be able to handle that. And I do think one of our challenges, and especially with some of the teams that we've played coming out of the All-Star break, we have not handled those swings well. And we've got to be able to handle those swings because it's inevitable. There's going to be times we may get off to a great start and it may swing back the other way. We may get off to a poor start. We've got to swing it back the other way. And it really takes a lot of concentration and 5 guys being connected to be able to deal with the emotions of those kind of swings. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, that's just what happens. So, certainly we'll have to play. We have not beaten them yet this year. And there's things that we're going to have to do at a higher level than what we've done the 4 previous times we've played them.
Billy, when we think about how to beat them or how to play them, obviously 3-point shots are important. They kind of allow you to take some threes. Where are you guys at? I mean, you are not bad with the three, but you don't have the volume of shots. Do you have to take more threes in this series?
Yeah, I've never been opposed to taking threes. I think that that's, something that you've got to look to do. They're a very good defensive team, so you got to kind of take what's available. I do think for us coming out of the All-Star break, one of the things that's really hurt us offensively is we just have not shot the ball particularly well. I think we're down like in the low 30s, 30% from the three-point line since the All-Star break. Now, to your point, we weren't necessarily taking a high volume of threes during the course of the season, but we really shot a great percentage. And, one of the things, and listen, maybe if he was available, it would look different because, guys go through 82 games. There's a lot of ups and downs. But, Lonzo Ball shooting 42 or 43% from three before he went out gave us a lot of floor spacing, and we've got to be able to take those threes when they're there. And I've never been a big believer to go in and say, listen, we have got to take 35 or 43-point shots, because if they're not the right shots and they're not in rhythm and they're not good shots and they're highly contested, you're going to really shoot a low percentage on those. So, we've got to understand how to attack their defense, and we've got to understand the ways that we can generate good looks. And listen, for a lot of our players, like, Vooch is a guy that plays in the pocket, and sometimes he's in the mid-range. I think everybody knows what a great mid-range player DeMar is. But sometimes we get caught with some of our better players in those areas of the floor, and they're good at making those shots. And if they're good shots, you want them taking them. But I've never been opposed to taking threes. And, the more threes we can get up when we have the opportunity to take them, we should definitely take them.
Billy, what's the key for Patrick Williams to have some sort of carryover effect from his 35-point game in the finale, where he was really more aggressive than he had been because he had to be?
I think for Patrick, the game was a little bit easier for him just because DeMar and Zach and Vooch had been, I think, great role models and great leaders to Patrick. Patrick's a very, very respectful guy, and I think people just need to understand, last year I think he came into the NBA as the youngest player in the league. He's 20 years old right now, and there's a level of respect that he has for veteran players. And what I mean by that is he is not the kind of guy that's just going to come in there and be full of ego about what he can do and what he should be doing. And he's always been a team-orientated guy, but he also has to understand that we need him to be aggressive. And he's got to pick his spots when he's on the floor with those guys. And it was a little bit easier against Minnesota. He obviously was a featured guy. And he can do that in what we're doing. But, there's times in transition where, he's got some open spaces one-on-one that he needs to go and attack. There's opportunities on the offensive glass that he's got to go in there and go attack. There's times in transition he's got to go attack and not just be necessarily a floor spacer for us. He shot the ball well coming off the wrist injury, but he's got to understand that when his spots or his time is available, he has got to go do that and not necessarily look to defer. And that's one of the things I think with him coming back off his injury has been, one, trying to get him into a better rhythm and flow and timing with being out so long. And then the other part is understanding his time to attack and make some things happen.
Billy, we'll let you go. Just in terms of finally getting to the playoffs for this organization, how important is this for the development of players? I mean, just playing in the playoffs, does it make you is it some kind of due you got to pay in order to just get in and see what it's like? It'll help some of these young guys.
I think when you're talking about competing at the highest level, like if you go back and even look at just different, situations with different teams, over the history of the game, I'm fortunate to be able to work with, Mo Cheeks, and, he was even telling the story to our guys. They had several times where they were in the Eastern Conference Finals against Boston. They were up 3-1, and lost. And they were up 3-1, and it got tied 3-3, and they had to go back to Boston for Game 7, and they won the game. And I'm sure there was a lot of pain and suffering the previous years of getting to that point. And you look at what Milwaukee went through, from, making deep runs in the playoffs, and falling short. There's not this linear smooth sailing. There's a lot of suffering when you're trying to win at the highest level, and you're playing against a lot of teams that, you know, are really, really battle tested. And, you know, you've got to be able, these experiences for Kobe, even Zach, Patrick, Io, these guys have never been in this situation before. Now, having guys like Caruso and DeMar DeRozan and Tristan Thompson have been there can kind of talk to them and give them an understanding of it. But these are very, very difficult because when you're talking about dealing with the best of the best this time of year, the teams, you know, a lot of times it comes down to all the small little detail things. And, you know, a lot of times you learn very, very valuable, hard lessons. And I think it's, you know, that way in life. You know, if you're trying to achieve and do something, it's when you keep hitting that roadblock and you keep falling short that you got to pick yourself back up off the mat and get up again. And I think, you know, even look at, you know, Michael Jordan's career, you know, as people think about all the championships he won, but he's even talked about trying to figure out how to win, you know, and it takes some time and it takes some suffering to go through it. But once you figure out what it really, really takes, that's where the growth is. And we're going to find out a lot, you know, about ourselves, our team, you know, going through this series, especially against a team that's won a world championship. But these are the things that you want to do because everybody can talk about this kind of stuff, but it really takes an incredible amount of perseverance and really being able to deal with setbacks, difficulties, challenges to be able to pick yourself back up and go back at it again. You know, you could lose a double overtime game in Milwaukee in game one and feel like you let one slip away, but you got to pick yourself up off the mat and get ready for game two. You know, or you could win game one and now all of a sudden, you know, how do you handle that? Like so much of it is the emotions of being able to handle setbacks and successes very, very quickly. And that's the real challenge part. And that's the mental toughness that you've got to build over a period of time.